Good evening and welcome to our show, Going Public. I'm Renee Fonseca, and joining us tonight is Mr. Philip Martin, the Terrebonne Parish School District Superintendent. Mr. Martin, thank you for taking time out of your night to join us.
Thank you, Renee. Good to be here.
I know with schools recently opening after Hurricane Ida, can you give us an update on the process or the phase that the current state that we're in?
Yeah, actually, we're just winding down what we would consider the first phase, which is the emergency response phase. That basically could be summarized putting a bunch of Band-Aids on schools and getting them where they can be opened in a safe manner. We have all students, with the exception of one school, are in school, not necessarily their school, but in a school, which we felt was very, very crucial to interest of our kids and our community to get schools back going again. The process has been a very lengthy one because no two schools were the same in the type damage they incurred. Some received relatively minor, and some received catastrophic, and everything in between. When you have 30-something campuses and several buildings sometimes on each campus, it provides for a lot of opportunity for damage, which we did. The repairs we've done thus far are strictly temporary, and the arrangements we've made to share and pair schools are strictly temporary. I want to emphasize that this is a temporary, to have a school what kids could go to every day. It's certainly not permanent. There's a long path to full recovery. I don't want to be misleading on that there's a lot of permanent repairs that have to be done at many schools before we can consider ourselves finally back to what we would consider normal. But the first phase is winding down in terms of the emergency response. We're not finished, but we can see light at the end of the tunnel in terms of having our schools with, like I said, with Band-Aids and temporary shrink-wrapped roofs. I didn't know you could shrink-wrap a roof, but you can. We've done that at many, many schools. And there are a lot of people, school people, contracted people, involved in that process. And in times of a disaster that our community is dealing with, it does provide the opportunity to see the best of many people that sometimes perhaps you had not observed or noticed before. I know I have seen that. And in these difficult times, those good traits in people sometimes become more obvious, and people not looking for anything except to help. And we've had numerous organizations and people helping and continuing to help. We certainly appreciate that.
So what would be our next phase? I know if we're in phase one now, what does phase two consist of?
The next phase is getting official professional assessments in terms of damage. And I guess the first phase, not to say the first phase, the first part of that phase is any building considered a replace rather than a repair. We don't have some answers on that yet, because that's a fairly in-depth and comprehensive assessment before that decision can be made. But the next phase is going into where we have to go through more traditional procurement methods, setting specs, setting what you want repaired, soliciting bids or RFPs for the repairs. It will be at a slower pace than the hectic first month of the first phase. It was a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week, 100-mile-an-hour pace to get schools fixed where kids could go to school. So that next phase will be the assessment, formulating the specifications for repair, and I'll use South Terrebonne. You just can't put out a spec and say go put a new roof. It's obviously much more detailed and specific, and that's where the engineers and architects and people have to come into play, and all the stuff that was on the roof, the AC equipment and all that. It's the infrastructure of the school is all impacted. So it's a very, very detailed and requires professionals, quite honestly, to make those type of assessments. And then once you have the assessments, make decisions on hopefully to repair. And then it's brick by brick after that project by project. Now, hopefully we'll have several projects going on at the same time. But the next phase is where we're going to be releasing assessments, bids, soliciting RFPs for services. And then the final and last phase is when we actually go out for bid, when we're saying, okay, this is what we want. And contractors will say, yeah, and this is how much we'll charge you to do it. I've given a very simplified version of those three phases, but that's basically what it is. We have one school. All schools are open now except for one, Montague Middle, and we hope to open it up very, very shortly. And SEC is not yet open. But we want to make sure both schools are ready before we do, so we're not jumping the gun and we didn't on any of the schools, and we'll do the same with these.
Now, do we have a time frame for phase 2 or phase 3?
You know, that's an excellent question, and to give you a short answer, no. The process that a team of architects, engineers, that would be both mechanical, structural, electrical, to make assessments at schools and determinations of what needs to be done is going to be a lengthy one. A long time is not a good answer, not a very specific, but it will be a long time. Now, we're not talking years, but we're not talking weeks either. It will be months and months for that process to take place.
Now, some of the schools that are heavily damaged, such that you mentioned South Terrebonne and Ellender, I know parents are speculating, are we going to rebuild, we're going to repair, what's going to take place? Do you have any of those answers yet, or I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, no, actually we do not, and actually we could probably throw in a couple other schools in that question mark. And you know, sometimes someone looks at it and says, oh, that can be fixed, and someone else looks at it like, no, it can't be fixed. But we will leave that up to professionals to make that final call and recommend to us should we. And quite honestly, you know, my opinion on that is just that. It doesn't carry any weight. We will rely on exactly what the assessment teams and professionals tell us what's in the best interest of the school district. Either way is going to be lengthy. You know, the building a school, that's a long time. And repairing a school such as ST, that's going to take a long time as well, because the damages were extensive. And ST and Ellender and Upper Locaia and Grand Kai Elementary, they didn't all have the same level of damage, but they all had fairly catastrophic damage.
And then right now, I know some schools are sharing or platooning. Is that the plan moving forward until we can get back into those schools? You know,
that is the temporary plan. I want to emphasize it's temporary. It's not ever intended to be permanent. And there are some other options before us, and quite honestly, the determination of that will be, if we use the school for an example, just pick a school and said, if it's repair it, timeline, and the experts can give us a timeline. If that timeline is reasonable, we may leave it just like it is till it's repaired. If the timeline is much longer, we will be looking at the temporary modular type, FEMA type, portable school type, that may not be the right word, to if it looks like it's going to be a very long time, to relocate to where they're on their own campus, so to speak, makeshift campus. So those are questions I don't really have the specific answers to, but in summary of that, if it looks like it's going to be an extended period, we're going to begin exploring the possibility of perhaps some other type of moving from very temporary to less temporary, but not permanent type buildings, till eventually we can get to permanent.
And since schools have started, have you heard any feedback from the principals or students that are sharing? How are they working out so far?
You know, that has actually been very inspirational. My supervisors, I asked one right after the first day she visited the school, and I said, well, how was it? And she said, I wanted to cry. I'm like, oh my God, it was that bad? She says, no, it was that heartwarming. The camaraderie, the welcoming, the feeling of warmth from both schools toward each other, you know, the whole school welcoming the, quote, visitors. And, you know, I know Bourgeois had some green and white banners down the hall, and Go Gators, and just, you know, and that was replicated at Terrebonne High and also the elementary schools. I visited several of the schools, and it's very obvious that I actually think the kids are enjoying some of the interactions with kids from different communities, and but that has been a very pleasurable experience. And I did have some concerns with that. Is that it's like Benjamin Franklin said, "Fish and company stink after 3 days." I'm hoping is that going to happen here? It didn't. There's been some very warm relationships and welcoming, and that continues to this day. And that just speaks of our kids and our community and our teachers, because we are a warm and welcoming community. That's our nature, to welcome people, and that's exactly what took place.
What can you tell us about the calendar? How will the calendar be affected this year? I know it hasn't been officially released yet, but are there any details that you would like to go over?
Sure, it hasn't been officially released yet, but it's fairly obvious that days that were previously designated as holidays, some of them will have to become school days. Fall break was the most one's right around the corner. It's very safe to assume that we will not be able to do a full weekend Thanksgiving. Every holiday period will have to have a few days shortened. We haven't decided which ones and how much, but we have to make up the time. And so a combination of holidays, extended time in the summer. We did that last year. We didn't finish, I think, to June 10th last year, so we may be going that long. I don't know how long it will take, but we'll have to make up the days. And what makes this one a little more difficult, and another thing will be minutes added. That will be to make up for the variable, because not every school missed the same number of days. Like Montague Middle, for example, as I mentioned earlier, they have more time to make up than the others, and there's some that started the first round of opening, and so we will try to make, there is one calendar for school days that's the same for every school, from Acadian to the last school in the alphabet. Which would probably be Village East. I was trying to think of my alphabet, trying to go down the list of names. A calendar that school days would be the same. The daily calendar may fluctuate from school to school, because we will try to accommodate by adding some minutes, vary from school to school to accommodate, so we reach that minimum number of instructional minutes that each district's required to do. So it will be a patchwork of holidays, summer, and minutes. And we'll try to do the days the same for every school and make adjustments individually by minutes, number of minutes and number of days you do added minutes to account for the individual differences from school to school. And we've done that before. It's not the first time.
Are we looking at that calendar still being released this week possibly?
Yes. Mr. Ojon, Assistant Superintendent, is putting some finishing touches on it, and we want to sit down and make sure that it's the best it can be. I mean, you missed so many days. We got to make up so many days. There's no good way to do that. We're just trying to figure out what's the best way.
Now, for a hurricane, does the state waive any of those minutes? Okay.
No.
So we still have to make up.
No. There's no waiver of minutes. There are certain circumstances for the shared and paired schools. My understanding is only then is there an instructional waiver, and we're not doing that with most of our schools, just some schools. But there's even some minimums that can be waived on that. So we're looking at fulfilling our obligation to the state for the number of instructional minutes.
Now, besides academics, how has athletics been affected?
Well, we tried to start up athletics ASAP as soon as we could after we started opening some schools, and our coaches wanted to do that. They thought it was good for our kids, and it was. I have to be very candid that, after a few days we got back, we were still kind of staggering with the amount of damage and the task in front of us. When someone asked about athletics, my first reaction was kind of be like, are you kidding me? But thinking on that for about 10 minutes, I'm like, we got to get back to normal. And this will give kids who are involved in those activities and kids who are not at least something to get their minds off perhaps some of the difficult situations that many of our children are dealing with. You know, I'm hearing stories from staff about kids, little kids, and situations they're in. It brings tears to your eyes. You know, we tend sometimes to look through the world through our own eyes and our situations, but when you look through it through other eyes and some other people's situation, it looks totally different.
Now, I know we talked about, high school getting started. What about our middle school sports?
Yeah, we're beginning that as well. We focused on high school because, let's face it, the kids' high school, this is their last shot. They're seniors this year or no year. So we focused on getting those going first. We're next going to begin, and facilities is a problem in that, 2 high schools and 4 gyms and 2 football fields are no longer available. So making that shift, and you got soccer and volleyball and football all going on. Well, soccer is going to be starting. So making those facility arrangements and sharing has been somewhat of a logistical challenge. But our coaches have been very, very concerned about their kids and their players, and they recognize, perhaps before I did, the kids need to get back into doing things that they view as normal and things that are important to kids.
Absolutely. It is definitely good for the community as well. I've
Sure.
seen lots of parents, thanking you guys for allowing their students to play. So definitely a good thing. What about standardized testing? How are we looking towards the end of the year? Is that still as normal?
Yes, the standardized test will be done in Terrebonne Parish this spring, as it's been done every spring. And, I have staff that are already working on different scenarios, dates, and things for that to happen. For the last month, probably for the first time in my career, I put instruction and academics as second priority. It wasn't first. Like, first was, let's get kids back in school. We'll worry about all that other stuff once we can get kids back in school. So we've got them back in school. Now we're beginning to focus on things that relate to school. And as I mentioned in the first segment, and my supervisors have relayed the same thing to me, and I've relayed it to the board, that when I go into a school, it looks like school, it feels like school, because it is school. It feels so warm and refreshing, and very, very, very good feeling to see kids in classroom and teachers teaching and students engaged in learning. For a little while there, you forget that we had a hurricane that just hit us because it appears and feels so normal.
And how are we in relation to COVID? Do we still have any quarantines? How are that? I know that's one more thing to add.
COVID, unfortunately, is still there. A dear friend of the school system, Mr. Jim Ernie, recently passed away. He was a very strong public ed supporter and worked very closely with the school board on many projects. So he's a reminder that COVID has not gone away. It's still there. And unfortunately it's still taking people's lives. So we can't ignore that or forget that. Recently, Dr. Brumley, the state superintendent, said that quarantining would be a parental choice, and we're complying with that. That we will notify parents if there's been a close contact, and if they choose to quarantine, they can, and if they choose not to, they can. There's some people that like that, some people don't like that, but we live in a state and in a country where we have to live by rules and regulations and laws, and when people who are in positions to make decisions and decrees, we need to honor and respect that. So that's what we plan to do. The mask mandate is still in effect. I know some people like mask ideas, some people don't, but the rule is we got to wear them, so we wear them. While we're in schools, except when we're outside, we give some break with that. So COVID is still there, and the COVID protocols are still there. The only minor exception is the quarantining. That has changed somewhat. But Hurricane Ida just sucked all the air out of the room, for everything. Sports, COVID, we kind of forgot about all that. But we have to remind ourselves, those things, the good things like sports are still there, and the things that are not so good, like COVID, is still there.
So have we had any other challenges besides COVID going back, or any other restrictions such as transportation?
Well, transportation has been a very, very gigantic puzzle and our supervisor does a very good job of managing the logistics of that. You talk about transportation to kids, Renee, am I on the right
Yes,
track?
or just
Yep.
any kind of challenge. That
Yep.
was one I know
Yeah,
that some.
transportation is a challenge in the best of times. But in this time, it is a particularly, because we have so many kids that I know there's going to be some temporary shelters that are being set up. Well, we're going to pick those kids up. And I was asked, would we send buses to those places, the places that are going to be designated as shelters? Absolutely, we will. You know, we want the kids in school. But the transportation is a piece that few people truly comprehend the complexities in that every child on every street in Terrebonne Parish has to be picked up and brought back there. You know, that's a fairly daunting logistical task in a short period of time. You don't have all day to do it. So that's something that we've struggled with. I shouldn't say struggled, that we have dealt with, but it is a challenge. And you know, unfortunately, we have many people in our community who've not been able to come home. Many of them don't have a home to come home to. And that's the heartbreaking stories. And as a school district, we just reach out to those people. And you know, some of them are worried about, will I get in trouble if my child is not in school? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, I told our child welfare and attendance department, I said, we have these computer-generated, kids absent so many, it sends one of these letters, your kids miss so many days, don't miss any more, and all this kind of stuff. I said, turn that machine off. People are dealing with enough without getting a letter that's going to concern them. So we're being as flexible, compassionate, and common sense as a district as we can, but because we know some parts of our community is relatively okay, and some parts are ICU. They're not okay, and we do realize that.
Well, it looks like our time is up. I want to thank you again for coming on our show. And I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to join us every Tuesday on Going Public. Good night.